Let us gather our hearts and minds as we listen to this music. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to St. Andrew's United Church worship on the third Sunday in the season of Lent. I invite you to take a moment to connect yourselves with all of those who have gathered to worship in mind and in spirit. For those of you who are on Zoom, you might be able to see a picture on your screen if you know where to go and what to click of those who are in the sanctuary. There are between 20 and 25 people in all gathered in the sanctuary. For those who are in the sanctuary, we can see there are more than 30 devices that have joined this circle. We are all together one worshiping community in our community of faith, St. Andrew's United Church. And as we gather in that one community in Christ, we wish to acknowledge the land on which we have gathered for worship. We have come together, and I'm going to invite Shannon to begin the acknowledgement from where she leads in Canmore.
Good morning, everyone. Here in Canmore, we acknowledge that we walk and meet upon the traditional territory of the Iyahe Nakota people, Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley nations, who are signatories to Treaty 7 in southern Alberta. And we also acknowledge the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3.
Here in Markham, we acknowledge that we walk and meet for worship upon the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg peoples. We also acknowledge in Markham that we are on the treaty lands of the Williams Treaty. We are all treaty people, and we seek to be on a path of reconciliation with all our treaty partners. As part of our welcome to everyone here and on Zoom this morning, let us hear the statement of our church's mission and vision. At St. Andrew's United Church, our mission includes inspiring faith, practicing compassion, and building connection in our community and the world. And we have a vision to be creative and courageous people empowered by the Spirit to practice love, reconciliation, and justice with authenticity, to be a spiritual home where Jesus' love for all is visible as we serve our diverse and multi-generational community. Christ is the life and the light of the world. And as we travel through this Lenten journey, may we be led from ignorance to enlightenment, from denying to self-denial, from shadows to light, from fasting to feasting, from death to life eternal. Behold, the light of Christ. I hope that you have all had a chance to read the announcements that were sent out with the order of service or that are in your hands here this morning. One of the things that was sent out by email but was not reprinted in the bulletin is the United Church appeal, and the attachment that included this appeal for the Ukrainian crisis includes some thoughts, a meditation from our moderator, Richard Bott, as well as a prayer, which you are all invited to use sincerely and thoughtfully. But there is also opportunity for you to contribute through the mission and service of our church to directly responding to the crisis in Ukraine. Donations that are made specifically designated to the Ukrainian crisis are forwarded through what's called ACT, ACT, Action by Churches Together Alliance, which is an organization of more than 140 churches around the world. And those funds go towards the people who are at the locations close to Ukraine, on the border, and as much as we can to directly to those who are assisting in this big crisis. Please be sure to take a look at that, which came through the attachment in your email this past week.
And on behalf of the transition team, I would like to highlight and make an invitation around the two announcements that were there. We really appreciate all of the input and feedback that we have heard from you folks from the congregational event at the end of January. And there were some very clear indications around how you felt about the original welcome that Reverend Catherine used, the mission and vision statements, and some folks even did some draft welcome statements. We would very much like to invite you, if you've already written an alternate, to approach us. We would like you to use your words and not have other people use your words. We would like to invite you to be a welcomer for our hybrid services. So if you're interested in giving it a go, if you want to bring a group together and brainstorm and write some alternatives, let's enter a time of experimentation and offer different kinds of welcomes. So please let Reverend Tim or myself know, and we would happily schedule you in as one of our welcomers. And if you haven't done the Theological Banquet survey, please do. We are looking for that feedback as well. Thank you. And I would like to invite folks on Zoom to scroll through the tiles that we see on our screen. And I am looking specifically at the screenshot of the church. Let's pass the peace to one another. It is wonderful to be in your presence, in person and virtually. Peace of
The
Christ be
peace of
with you.
Christ be with you. Let us come together in prayer as we approach God. Let us pray. Holy One, Word of life, in these days of Lent, may we be led through the wilderness where nothing seems familiar and into a place where we notice you calling us. Lead us into a new day where we trust you with our fears, our prejudices, because we know you sent us. Lord, you have sent us Jesus to show us a better way to face the unknown in this season of Lent. Travel with us as we face the places in our lives that would keep us from loving our neighbors. Turn us gently, God, and may your Spirit find us willing. Amen. I'm going to invite you to join together in singing now. The hymn is number 111, as the sun with longer journeys. This hymn offers a message which I very much look forward to at this time of the year as the days are getting longer. Let's sing together, and I'm going to invite you to remain seated as we sing.
Friends, I invite you to join me in a prayer of confession and a reminder that when we come to God in a spirit of confession, we are certainly bringing our own shortcomings to God, but we acknowledge also the ways in which personally we participate in systemic oppression, systemic violence as well. So, friends, I invite you to join me in a prayer of confession. God of promise and hope, you call us to trust in your way and set before us paths of faithfulness. Sometimes we hesitate to follow you and to make changes in our lives. Sometimes our priorities and commitments reflect personal interests more than your desire for our lives and the world. Free us, O God, that we may be faithful to you. And in a moment of silence, we bring before you, O God, our personal prayers of confession. Friends, hear words of assurance. On the journey of Lent, we seek a spirit of discernment and wisdom. On the journey of Lent, we move toward relationship with God, follow Jesus and know new life, seek the Spirit and know new insight, move toward God and know grace. Friends, we are forgiven. Thanks be to God. Amen. And today we have Rick, who is going to be sharing his gifts of music with us once again. To you, Rick.
Good morning, everybody. On this first day of beautiful spring, this is above all. Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways we are, you were here before the world began.
believe we are all very familiar. But let us be reminded that Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan in response to religious scholar or a lawyer, as other Bible translations say, who came to ask him a very sincere question. Ken?
Good morning, everyone. Just then, a religion scholar stood up with a question to test Jesus. Teacher, what do I need to do to get eternal life? He answered, what's written in God's law? How do you interpret it? He said that you love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and muscle and intelligence, and that you love your neighbor as well as you do yourself. Good answer, said Jesus. Do it and you'll live. Looking for a loophole, he asked, and just how do you define neighbor? Jesus answered by telling a story. There was once a man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. On the way, he was attacked by robbers. They took his clothes, beat him up, and went off, leaving him half dead. Luckily, a priest was on his way down the same road, but when he saw him, he angled across to the other side. Then a Levite religious man showed up. He also avoided the injured man. A Samaritan traveling the road came on him. When he saw the man's condition, his heart went out to him. He gave him first aid, disinfecting and bandaging his wounds. Then he lifted him onto his donkey, led him to an inn, and made him comfortable. In the morning, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take good care of him. If it costs any more, put it on my bill. I'll pay you on my way back. What do you think? Which of the 3 became a neighbor to the man attacked by robbers? The one who treated him kindly, the religion scholar responded. Jesus said, go and do the same. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you very much, Ken. Let us come together in prayer. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Listen to a story which I first heard some time ago when I was in Emmanuel College, and a number of students were all taking a break, sitting around the student lounge. This is something that I overheard from another group of students in the next row of couches over. They said that there was a class of theological students who were all asked to prepare and be ready to preach a sermon on the Good Samaritan. They were all intended to hand it in at the same time at the chapel, and one of them would be chosen to preach the sermon in front of all of the others in the class. Well, as the students made their way towards the chapel that day, they came upon a man on the floor in the corridor who looked a little bit disheveled. He could have been ill or just drunk, but it certainly seemed as though he had been sleeping on the streets for a little while. And as the student ministers went by with briefcases in their hands and the thoughts of the Good Samaritan in their heads, the story goes, as you may have already guessed, not one of them stopped to check and see how this fellow might have been and whether or not he needed any help as he lay in their way on the corridor of the theological college. Now, because I only overheard that story in a student lounge, I can't tell you if it actually happened. I can't tell you if it is true in the sense that it actually took place in some school somewhere. Nevertheless, there is something about that story that rings true, and it stuck in my mind. I remembered it because it is very likely the kind of story that I might find myself in, and I don't really know what kind of questions I might ask in the midst of that situation. As we listen to the story from Matthew chapter 10, from the Gospel of Luke chapter 10 again, we are reminded that the story of the Good Samaritan is one that Jesus told in response to a question. As a matter of fact, the religion scholar, as the Message version of the Bible calls him, came to Jesus not just with one question, but he seemed quite sincere in seeking the kind of meaning and information that many of us yearn for in our own world. The first question that he asked Jesus was, "What must I do to get eternal life?" I'm not sure how many different answers we may have come upon in our search for that kind of very important question in our lives. But what the lawyer or the scholar discovers when he brings that question to Jesus is that Jesus had a question for him. Jesus wanted him to know, what are the answers that already live within you? What are the things that you already understand and know about God's love and God's world? And so when Jesus tried to respond to that question, he first asked, "Tell me what the law says. What do you read there? What is it that you have been encouraged and trained to understand from the time that you were very young?" Well, the lawyer had an answer. He knew what the law said. And when Jesus told him, "That's a very good answer," he had another question. And it seems to me, as we begin to hear the story of the Good Samaritan from Jesus in response to the lawyer's very important and seemingly sincere question, the gospel writer is reminding us that sometimes Jesus is asking us to look within to the answers about God's world and God's love we already have. Sometimes having a sincere question can be life-giving and more hopeful than pretending that we have all the knowledge in the world, pretending that we know the final answer or the right answer. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, one question leads to another, and finally, Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. We are all familiar with this story, and as we hear it once again, I think the reality is that we hear more questions than answers in this story. A man went out on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. We don't know anything about this man. We don't know what his good qualities are. We don't know what his weaknesses are. All that we hear is that he fell among robbers and was left in very bad circumstances. Even the injustice that was done against him leads us to all kinds of questions. The story does not help us to say, where does evil come from? Why did it happen? The story only places us in a place where someone is in need. And one of the reasons why this scripture passage came to my mind this past week as I was thinking about our gathering in worship this morning is because of the circumstances in our world today. As we hear the news of what is happening long ways around the world, but yet seemingly very close to us in the country of Ukraine, we have many questions. We want to know what, if anything, we can do. What is it that has led to this? What can explain this kind of suffering and urgency in our world today? We are not always pushed to ask questions like this, but there are times when we cannot avoid it. There are times when we need to sincerely ask the question and perhaps not believe that we have the right answers all right away. Imagine it would be very easy for us to say, I can see this person is evil. I can see that the decisions that are being made are completely wrong and unjust, and that is what we have to fight against. But in the face of our desire to quickly answer those questions, what is wrong? Where is this terrible situation coming from? I wonder if the gospel of Christ is inviting us to ask more questions, to live with unanswered questions, to move towards a place where we are in tune with the compassion that helps us to act and to do something in that circumstance. As much as we have all been asking, what is it that we can do in response to this crisis? How can we help? I know that there are many other times in our life when we are perhaps pushed to ask that question more specifically to ourselves. As we pass people on the street, on then downtown Toronto or in other places, who are asking for our help, who we seem to be meeting a need. About 10 years ago, I was leaving a presbytery meeting in Oshawa Presbytery fairly late at night, and I got onto the 401 in order to make my way up to Aurora on the road. The weather was terrible. It was late in November and the rain was coming down in buckets. There weren't too many cars on the road, and so it was very easy for me to see. I had a clear vision of someone who was several hundred meters up in front of me. At first, I only saw the red lights on the back of the car, but all of a sudden, those red lights turned to white, and I realized that the car had lost traction and spun around and drifted somewhat gently off onto the shoulder and into the guardrail at the side of the highway. Going at the speed I was going, I realized that the question in my mind that was going through my mind, I only had 3 or 4 seconds in order to decide. Do I stop? Do I try to find out if they are okay, if they are hurt, if they need any kind of help? It was not an easy decision to make, and as I drove along, I was past the car that seemed to be sitting very safely at the side of the road without making any decision. For one thing, I thought to myself, one of these drivers must have a cell phone. The person probably doesn't need my particular help. They will probably get the right assistance by someone making a call. And so I continued on my way too afraid to stop and see what was going on. Now, I don't know what kind of questions you might have been asking yourself in that kind of a situation, but I obviously didn't ask myself enough questions in order to come upon the truth of what might have made the most difference. And that is that I had a cell phone myself. I could have made that call. 10 years ago, my cell phone was still the old style, and I would keep it off. I never ever used it unless I turned it on to make a call to someone that I intended. And so I wasn't accustomed to using it all the time, and I never even thought about using it. When Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan, it seems to me that it's the questions that were asked in the midst of human need which led to life. The Good Samaritan listened to his inner compassion. His heart went out to the one who was at the side of the road. And while we come to the places where we want to find out more information, want to feel more secure or certain in our lives, we are guided by the gospel, which invites us to ask our questions with sincerity, to listen to the answers and the bigger questions that come from within, where we can grow and continue to learn about God's love in the world. Listen to another story, this one from a fellow minister whose sermons material we have shared over the years in an online chat group with other ministers. And this fellow says that he's remembering back to a time when he was much younger to tell this story. Their German club was making good time on their road trip to a place in the States called Decatur. They were making great time until, pow, the back tire on Mr. Miller, who was the adult in the road trip, the back tire on the station wagon blew. Mr. Miller cursed mildly under his breath. So he slowly guided the car onto the shoulder where he was able to stop on the interstate highway. The fellow telling the story is one of the 5 high school students who was traveling with Mr. Miller in his station wagon that day. But Mr. Miller wasn't fazed. He grabbed the jack from the back of this car and the spare tire. As the rear of the car rose up off the ground, he told us about the time that he had to change a flat tire in the middle of an inner city slum at midnight. That was the time when I learned to change a tire in 5 minutes flat, he said. We watched as he spun the lug nuts off of the wheel and took off the old tire. We watched him hoist the spare into its place. We watched him secure the lug nuts and then start to lower the car back onto the road. We're still going to be there in time to get to our program with the German club, he said. As the car lowered back onto the ground, it settled onto the spare tire and then settled onto the road. The spare tire was completely flat as well. We watched as Mr. Miller cursed again, this time not so quietly, nor very mildly. We all realized that the spare tire was not going to get us to our destination. Mr. Miller stood on the white line at the side of the highway. His brown suit and tie looked very respectable, and he had one flat tire leaning against his right leg. He pointed his thumb out towards Springfield, the closest town, and we 5 high school students huddled together, embarrassed, back in the car, which was once again jacked up into the air. At least we're on a busy highway, Mr. Miller said confidently. Someone is bound to stop for us. Well, I'm sure that you even know the answer to the next question as we are listening to this story. 3 lanes of traffic flowed past. Cadillacs carrying businessmen in 3-piece suits, truckers hauling cargo to Chicago. All of those whooshed past on the highway. Sports cars, vans, buses. Mr. Miller's thumb was getting pretty tired, pointing north after half an hour. Finally, an old, rusty pickup truck stopped. Out of the truck got 2 long-haired young people with torn t-shirts and blue jeans. They threw the flat tire into the bed of the truck and squeezed together in the cab so that Mr. Miller could get in with them. They drove him the 15 minutes to the next service station. About 40 minutes later, Mr. Miller was back with this young man at the station wagon. They had missed their morning program. However, Mr. Miller said they had paid for their meals, so they were going to go on to Decatur anyways and have lunch. As he drove on, Mr. Miller was mumbling to himself. Over and over, he kept repeating the same thing. If I had come across those 2 characters hitching a ride, I'd never have stopped for them. If I had come across those 2 characters trying to hitch a ride, I would have never stopped for them. As we ask the questions that are most important to us and most dear in our lives, as we search for the kind of answers which we hope will add clarity to our lives, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus invites us to put ourselves in a situation where there are more questions than answers. He invites us to listen to those questions with honesty and sincerity, to be able to answer those questions in our yearning to be lifted into an understanding of God's love and God's fairness in new ways during our travel through Lent. Thanks be to God. Let us come together in prayer. Lord, help us to listen carefully to the questions that come to our hearts and minds in the midst of the difficulties and the uncertainties of our lives. Help us to not try and answer our questions too quickly. Help us to recognize how you are being the one inviting us to grow in our understanding and in our appreciation for the tremendous size of your love and care which cannot be fully described or understood in our world. Through Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. I invite you to turn and join together in singing the hymn that we heard, perhaps many of you for the first time last Sunday, is from More Voices, 144, and we sang the first 2 verses. This morning I invite you to join in verses 3 and 4, but the 4th verse is going to take you by surprise. The last line does not end quite as quickly as the end of verse 3. You will find that you are invited to repeat all of the last of the verses in the song earlier, where we talk about God's Spirit in our world, like a mighty sea, like a river strong, like a gentle rain, like a healing stream. Restless current, spirit water rushing on to distant shore. God is carving out a channel in a new direction, calling for an end to hate and war, like a river strong. Mighty sea, reaching far horizons, spirit water with a love both deep and wide. God is working in our hearts to shape a new tomorrow. God will always challenge and provide, like a mighty sea, like a river strong, like a gentle rain.
Friends, we move into the time of our service where we consider our stewardship, our discipleship, how we are giving of ourselves in time, talent, and treasure. And we're reminded that the way of Lent is a path that we travel each year, and it's a time for us to remember Jesus' journey and all the people that he met on that journey. When he was with those folks, he was careful to listen to the people and to his God. When he was with him, he would pray, sometimes with words and sometimes with tears. When he was with those people, he would share what he had, his teachings, his table, his love. So, friends, we continue to worship God following Jesus by listening, by praying, and by sharing. And we ask in this hymn of dedication that our gifts of our time, talent, and treasure be dedicated and blessed by the Holy One. Let's sing with Jeannie the verse from hymn number 537, Your work, O God, needs many hands.
Your work, O God, needs many hands to help you everywhere. If some there are who cannot serve unless our gifts we share, because we love you and your work, our offering now we make. Be pleased to use it as your own, we ask for Jesus' sake.
Amen. We're going to move into our prayers of the people, and through Lent, we are singing a sung response, basically singing our prayer. into the prayers of the people, and then we repeat that sung response before we say the Lord's Prayer together. And so let us join with Jeannie once again as we sing the first time, Open Our Hearts.
Open our hearts, open our minds, open our lives to you, O loving God. Open our hearts, open our minds, open our lives to you, O loving God.
So friends, with open hearts, we come before God, and today I am going to be using the words written by our moderator, the Right Reverend Richard Bott. It is the prayer that is found in the attachment that was sent out on Friday. It is a prayer for the Ukraine. God of all creation, God of the heights and the depths, and everything in between. God of this green blue bauble spinning in space, a place of such wondrous creatures and abundant life. We are praying for a miracle, one of the smallest of changes, one that would have immense consequence as people around the world seek the end of the war that Russia has perpetrated on Ukraine, seek to end the death, seek to make a peace. What I am changing for is a change of mind, a change of heart, a change of worldview in the Russian leadership who brought this into being. Help them, God of all hope, to see this is the chance to step back from the war, to pull back the escalation, to let go of whatever it is that made them choose the path that has led to the chaos, the destruction, the death in Ukraine. We need a miracle that will help them to not only pull back their forces to within their borders, their rhetoric of nuclear option, but to be part of the rebuilding of the nation they sought to overtake. In the midst of the grief and tears and anger and rage of the parents and grandparents, of the siblings and children, of the friends and neighbors of those who have been killed in this act of aggression. Help us to bring this to an end, God, one that will allow the sunflowers of Ukraine to reach their growth, sprouting in the soil of peace under a hope-filled sky. Help us to make that miracle, God, for it is truly needed. In Christ's name, in the Spirit's power, in the Creator's love, I pray. And in a moment of silence, let us bring before the Holy One our deepest prayers of need, of concern, and of celebration. And we end the gathering of all our prayers as we once again sing, Open Our Hearts.
Open our hearts, open our minds, open our lives to you, O loving God. Open our hearts, open our minds, open our lives to you, O
friends, let us join our hearts and minds and words together as we say the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples. Our Mother, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
And as we gather to sing our closing hymn, 120 from Voices United, I invite us to stand as we follow Jeannie's music. Oh, Jesus, I have promised.
Oh Jesus, I have promised to serve you to the end. Remain forever near me, my Savior and my friend. I shall not fear the journey if you are by my side, nor wander from the pathways if you will be my guide. Oh, let me feel you nearly, the world is ever near. I see the sights that dazzle, the tempting songs I hear. My foes are ever near me, around me and within. But Jesus, walk on nearer and shield my soul from sin. Oh, let me hear you speaking in accents clear and still, above the storms of passion, the murmurs of self-will. Oh, speak to reassure me, to hasten or control. Now speak and make me listen, O guardian of my soul. Oh Jesus, you have promised to all who follow you, that where you are in glory, your servant shall be too. And Jesus, I have promised to serve you to the end. Oh, give me grace to follow my Savior and my friend. Go now in peace, never be afraid. God will go with you each hour of every day. Go now in faith, steadfast, strong, and true. Know God will guide you in all you do. Go now in love and show
Go into the world with a daring and a tender love. Go in peace. The world is waiting. And whatever you do, do it for love and in the spirit of Jesus, who is your Christ. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit go with you all, now and forever. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Hallelujah.